out your life. See, we coming with that light force. Pump it down in the town, praying that it takes its course. Reminiscing on the beautiful places, the different faces, exotic stages. This music takes its high for real. I know that fear for real, but still. They say love is the answer, they say love is the way. Missing the world, I hope I see you again someday. In isolation, trying to find the right words to say. I love you. To the rest of the world, from Oakland to the rest of the world.
BandFest 2021 International is 31 days of arts, culture, education, civic discourse, and networking events offered as a community celebration of our legacy of resilience, our massive reservoir of talent, and our legendary determination for equity and justice for Black people. BandFest 2021 is a hybrid event offering both virtual and live programming. The festival is presented by the Black Arts Movement Business District, Community Development Corporation, and produced by Oakland's premier North American African Theater Company, Lower Bottom Players. Under the artistic direction of Ayodele Nzinga, MFA, PhD, the Poet Laureate of Oakland. For most information on festival programming, please head to bandfest.com.
Word got eyes and ears on and she witnessing. Slanger see you trying to turn a push into a shove, but are they listening?
Hopefully you can see a bigger picture.
Inspired by your joy, I'm gonna help you make your point. If they don't see the bigger picture, they'll get in where they slip them. It's hard to uplift them once they toe tag and split them. Inspire, help them see the bigger picture.
Hi, my name is Ayodele Nzinga, and this is The Bigger Picture. We live in an attention deficit society where it's very difficult for some of us to see past the house that's on fire right there in front of us. How do we get through the month? You know, how do we make sure nothing gets turned off and we can get to work next month? And it's kind of hard to see bigger than that. We have a vague idea that perhaps something isn't right, and maybe we're really sure some specific things aren't right. But we don't have the luxury of time to sit and consider how things touch and how there's actually a matrix or a system in which we operate that allows us a certain range of choices within the rules of that container that we're in. So the bigger picture wants a 360 view. It wants to connect things to one another. Today's guest is poet and organizer, Aja Monet. Okay, so let's go into your interview. And I want to start with who you are, a self-introduction. Okay.
Well, thank you for having me. I was named Aja Monet Baki by my mother, and I arrived on the week of the harmonic convergence in 1987 to a Long Island College hospital in Brooklyn, New York, and I have been brought up most of my life by a single mother, and well, at least for the younger part of my life. And the experiences that were a part of my early childhood helped to shape and form how I view and respond and move in the world, and why poetry became something I gravitated towards. It was really the power of language and storytelling and the animation of, you know, how we gossip, how we get the word around, how we make fun of ourselves, how we talk about our sadness. All those things were my cues of the Black radical tradition, I guess, as I was growing up to learn and come to understand it. And as I matured and I went to school, I gravitated towards writing and poetry consistently. It became the thing that called me. And I felt like there was something that I gravitated towards about other poets, reading them, like Langston Hughes and Maya Angelou. And I wanted to do what they did with words. I wanted to find a way to make people feel what they made me feel. And so I studied, and I spent a lot of time being at the foot of my elders and paying homage so that I could hopefully follow in their footsteps and to bring something new or different that maybe they weren't doing. And so, yeah, that's a bit of who I am. I've done and seen and gone and been a part of so many different things and organized in so many different ways. But I'm here like everyone else, an engaged witness, a participant, and a servant, you know, to my people and to this planet.
So, what a lovely introduction. Um, so, where are you being who you are in this moment right now? And please tell me how you're defining this moment right now.
That's a good one. I would say I am learning to let go of the parts of my story that I have held on to for fear of truly being free. Um, I am reconciling with the trauma and the suffering that I've endured and that I've witnessed from my family, and the things that I no longer want to define me. You know, I am healing and learning and to step into my power and to honor those who came before me, as particularly my ancestors. I've been doing a lot of work on listening and being as attentive as I can to my highest self. That's been a big part of the work I've been doing. I know it to be true that the world is going through a tumultuous time. I know it to be true that the narratives that we're being shown and that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis are propagating more fear and more confusion and more anxiety than I think is set out for us to truly hold. It's not for us to hold on to, and I think it's intentional for us to be distracted from ourselves, so that we fight more than we actually resolve and come to compassion and understanding, and really elevate, ascend to our highest self, to be what we've been longing for, to step into the things that we've been longing for. So I'm learning, I'm a student. I'm a student of life. And sometimes I'm in this realm, and oftentimes I like the other realms too. And I realize that this body isn't all there is to life, and there's a lot more to experience. There's a lot more that awaits us that we can tap into once we really heal from the wounded body, right? We can get to some other places. And so sometimes I'm here and sometimes I'm elsewhere, and oftentimes I'm in between.
In the liminal.
Mm-hmm.
So here is here, and the in-between is the in-between. Share with me one of those other places that you allow yourself to reside in.
In that other place, I'm my fullest self. I'm free, I'm expansive, I'm limitless. I'm I'm a part of everything there is and there was, and everything there is to be. And I speak to myself with so much more love and care and tenderness and compassion and magic, you know, everything is possible there. I am fully loved and held and cherished and adored. And, you know, and there's no judgment on good or bad, you know, there's no, it just is. Justice just is. And when I'm there, I think what I experience is a collective, a strong collective voice, like something that is so beyond just me, you know, it's like knowing there's a multitude of voices there. And it doesn't have any specific form or any specific identity. It is what it is. So yeah, it's interesting to talk to you about it or to communicate, because I think I'm still trying to find the language. But there, ironically, as a poet, when I'm there, there's no need for words. You know, words fall short. And at times I come back here and I'm like, what am I trying to do with words? You know, they can never encapsulate fully what it is to be and to exist. And I think that's sometimes the torment of being a writer, right? Is knowing that there are ways of moving in the world that you can't share. It's just, it is what it is. You don't know how to replicate that for someone else, but helping others get to that place for themselves. And so I think I'm trying to learn how to communicate things in a way that shows that we all have the capacity to get to a place within ourselves that allows us to, I guess, be the most free and the least wounded, you know. But yeah, I'm rambling now, so I'll stop there.
Nah, that's a beautiful ramble. I recognize the space you are describing. I think the closest to words I have in quick order is like, sometimes a feeling of sublimity takes over me, and I'm tapped into the one voice. And there's such a profound sense of knowing what is right. And it is a hopeful, expansive space where one does not feel personal limits. And the thing of being connected to everything that ever was and everything that could ever be, feeling powerful and very, very small, all at the same time. I get to go in that room sometimes too. Yeah. So you mentioned that sometimes, having been in that space, words perhaps become inadequate. So I have a whole bunch of questions at one time. You just pick the part that attracts you. So I have this theory that words are much more powerful than people know that they are. They actually create reality and then hide their role in having done so. Yet, we're oftentimes we're very small. Sticks and stones can break my bones. You know, words don't mean anything. So we say things like, well, it's only words, or will change occur because it's just words, you know, it's action that counts. Larry says a light cut dark on command. That instructs me that words always precede action, at least an internal conversation. How do you feel about words? the power of words.
Well, I just want to let you know I'm on one of the busiest streets, so the noise is annoying me. So I apologize.
You might hear noise too, so just let everybody know this is the pandemic edition, and this is what real life sounds like. And so, you might hear dogs bark, trucks go by.
That's the garbage truck.
Yeah, we're in the world. It's all good.
I think that words are very powerful. This is why I think sometimes I feel like, well, what am I doing? Do I know? I sometimes become terrified of the power that they hold. Because sometimes I even write something or I share something and I look back on it and I'm like, where'd that come from? I don't even know how those words came to be, but they speak to something real and deep and true. And I think about words as a tonal hold for a vibration, for a frequency. It's like sound has so much power, and the intention that we put in sound, the vibration that we function on. If we think of ourselves as energetic beings, that words are the hug of sound. They have the way of shaping what a vibration, what intention goes beyond in sending a vibration. And so words are things, Maya Angelou says, they hang on your clothes and in your curtains and in your shower and in your couch, and they hang on you, and I say that to say I grew up with, when I was young, I grew up not being forced, but I was one of those weird kids that actually ran to the church. And it was because I had, like I said, going through a lot with a single mom and a lot of issues with my father and family. The church was where I went to look for family, but I grew up in the Black church, so it was a very different way of kind of dealing with things. You see people possessed and elders speaking in tongues and, all types of things that let you know that there's another way of seeing the world, and there are things that are unseen that move and make decisions about how we move. So in that, I remember being a little girl and thinking about an elder who comes to me right now, who spoke over me. And I remember her taking my hands. We were at like one of these prophetic encounter conventions, and she took her hands over my ears and she started to pray. And she was saying how this child has heard things they should not have heard, words that have been spoken over that she should have never had to hear being spoken over her. And she started to rebuke, some of those words, right? And I'm here sobbing and not knowing why or what comes from. And she's telling me about my mother and my father and all these things that you're like, how does this person know? What are they speaking to? And what I realized was that a reason why I think I gravitated towards writing was because I was trying to make right the wrong of how words were used in my life. And that a big part of the things that I didn't like about my mother and my upbringing was the carelessness of her words and how abusive she was with her words. And not just her, my grandmother, that they had a way that I knew that words were weapons. I knew what it was like to use words as a weapon. I grew up very aware of that words could cut like a knife, and they could shoot like bullets. Like, I had experienced that, as a little girl. And I think a big part of my use of words now is to heal that little girl, to tell that little girl the things she needed to hear, to resolve and to tend to those wounds. that she experienced. And so words for me are they're very complicated because yes, they not very complicated, it's simple, but it also lets me know that it's a tool like anything else, you know, and it's a gift and a skill set that some folks have. Some people are good with herbs and they're good with medicinal plants, and you know, some people are good with the ocean and seas and sailing boats, and some people are good with the sky and astronomy, you know, and some people are good with words, you know. This just, it's like some people could play a guitar, you know, and some people can play in piano. I think being able to play words, you know, being able to use words is its own craft and its own purpose and its own skill set. Being able to wield them in a certain way. But I think as I've learned and gotten older, I think I'm still trying to understand the power of words as I start to think about, well, what is language, and when do words meet in language, or when does words begin and language begin or language end? How does that play into each other? Because there's multiple languages, you know, they say music is a language, and there's spiritual language. So I think words are interesting to me because they have a sound, but then when I learn translations and I start to learn other ways of saying things, or learning about certain cultures having multiple words for God, right? Or many words for love, it expands my worldview, you know? I think words, what I've learned about words is that they're an approximation of feelings and ideas and experiences. And it's us scratching at the words to try to get to the nugget of that energetic frequency. And yeah, it's us attempting to communicate a universal truth, I think. But they can be weapons. I learned that at a very young age, they can be. And that can be medicine too.
So again, throwing a lot at you, just pick up the part that sticks. Languages, and we with an S, are agreements with an S. And you voice something that I believe deeply. Language holds a worldview. So when we encounter a language with multiple words for love, that is a culture in which the thought of love is uplifted and upheld. English, by observation, is constructed on metaphors of war. And I don't mean the King's English, as we call it, but Daniel Webster's English that we use here in America. Philosophers like Lakoff have written extensively on the fact that this language is composed of metaphors of war and power and aggression. And so me as a philosopher, I riffed off that and say, if the worldview is inside the language. And for me, this informs things like the persistence of Ebonics. I think that Ebonics is the tribe that was formed by Africans being brought here, North American Africans. The persistence of Ebonics has to do with the subconscious desire not to assimilate. And so another worldview is tended, one that's more fluid, elusive, built a lot on inversion. You see it, you hear it, but you don't understand it because you're looking at it from the outside. I also think that there is a gap to be shot between what I call ink culture. Again, North America is based on ink, right? Give you jazz and you want to see the instruments because your instruments don't make that sound, right? So what do you say? You say, write it down. Because if you write it down, it can be performed exactly the same way every time. The ability to replicate becomes important. But what's lost in the ability to innovate? A griot can tell you one story at a wedding, and tell you the same story at a coronation, and then repeat it again at a war council, and it will have a different meaning in each context, according to the improvisation and the way in which the language is performed. So, talk to me about spoken word and how spoken word does or doesn't differ for poets who write for the page. You know, talk to me about spoken word.
Well, I think it's kind of, it's like an inarticulate phrase, because I believe words are meant to be spoken. You know, words started as sounds, as things that were alive in people's mouths. They weren't something that was a part, it didn't originate, as you say, in ink culture. You know, it originated off the tongue and from the mouths of people. And so, you know, I think if you are a poet, you have to be engaged in the realm of sound more than, you know, it's a words for me. That's why it's so interesting. I was able to be a part of this show where I had a band, and I've always, you know, I thought of like the Jane Cortezes and the Ntozake Shangays and, you know, even Amiri, how a bunch of them were always made it very crucial to have a band or to work with musicians. They were artists, they were poets who worked with musicians. And when I recently got the chance to work with the band, I felt like I made sense, you know, more than I ever had when I was being read on the page. You know, I feel like I don't make sense when people read me on the page. And not even so much that I don't make sense, like literally people can't understand what I'm saying, but I think you don't know what I'm doing with language until you hear me do it, you know? And so I think it goes over people's heads that what I'm doing is actually so much more profound than the page can hold, you know, and can make sense of. And I didn't understand that until I was, you know, spending time with musicians and recognizing that I, you know, think of myself as like a word musician now than what I did before. So for me, words, when I choose words for a poem, it's not so much just, okay, I want it to sound this way, or I want to tell the story this way. It's like I'm literally revising based off of how the sounds come out my mouth, and I'm listening for how they flow together, you know, because words are their own little village of beings and entities that you're learning how to make them harmonious. You know, you're learning how to get them to get along with each other. And I love that about jazz musicians. I think growing up and being fascinated by music and knowing that for a lot of us, music was cut out of our schools, out of our programs. I mean, for a very long time, I couldn't tell you the difference between a guitar, a bass, a drum, you know, a violin, nothing, because a lot of our kids didn't have, you know, live instrumentation and programs like that in their schools. And you only hear what's on the radio, and a lot of that's like, you know, made in a computer. So you don't really know what even the authentic sound of a voice is. There's a generation of kids who hear my voice and they're like, why she sound like that? Oh, you mean like a voice? Like, you know, like a person with a real voice. You know, they're used to the auto tune and the correction and this perfection. But the beauty of the beauty of blues and jazz was and is that sound, that tonal quality, and that improvisation, as you say, and the way that, you know, two artists, you see, like, man, being in New Orleans and watching a piano player like rock out with another piano player while the guy's playing the saxophone, another guy's playing the trumpet, and you just see them communicating. You know, there's no words, but it's like you feel the words, you hear them, you know, you can really hear them. They're talking, you know. There's this Billie Holiday recording on YouTube. If you watch this, her Fine and Mellow is it. It's a long, like 9-minute or something video, and it's her singing and these musicians just playing with her, and you're like, man, they're really talking to her, you know. And she's talking back, and you could see in her face, like, you know, the little unspoken communication that they have, like her just like looking at them with a little eye and being like, okay, like that's where y'all go. Okay, this is where I'm gonna go. And for me, I think that that's a big part of what I learned to love about spoken word. You know, Sekou Sundiata used to say that spoken word was an inarticulate term, you know, and I think it is. I think that it's a marketing scheme. You know, it's a racialized way of identifying and trying to box in folks who have real skill sets and real poets and not studying what we are doing, right? So there's just like, it's a way to kind of diminish, oh, that's spoken word over there and this is poetry over here. Whereas no one just says, oh, well, that's poetry in and of itself. That's what poetry is supposed to do, because then it would require these white literary elitist poets to have to learn something beyond the page and to actually have to study what it is that cannot be replicated, and to go into a place within themselves that forces themselves to truly come to terms with the colonization of language, you know, and the colonization of cultures and peoples. And there's an intentional, I believe, effort to make this false notion and dichotomy between spoken word and poetry, when in actuality, if you're a poet, you're a poet, and you got to know how to read your poem like your life depended on it. You know, you got to know how to read your poem with some soul, some energy, some spirit, some frequency. And it's heartbreaking, because there's some people that I've also dealt with the other side, where I've read their poems on pages, and I'm coming to it with like my way of saying words, and I'm like, wow, this is incredible. And then they read, and you be like, oh, please never read again. You just ruined the whole poem. What is you doing? And that's the part that I can't really understand yet, you know, I think they have a person in them that's really saying those things. There's a soul somewhere in there that's really speaking, and, you know, people can channel for sure. But I think some people don't know how to, have not developed, I think, the healing mechanism to really say a thing, and to know that saying is doing a thing, and know that doing a thing is being a thing, you know? So when I start to hear the words around spoken word, it used to trigger me at first. I used to be like, why are they saying that? And now I'm, you know, I take it, whatever people want to say and call it, they can call it. It is what it is. However, I do resist the notion that white folks have to learn to get to see what we're doing with language and with words, as a true high art. You know, that is the high art. That is the I mean, they don't even have to, I don't really care what white folks care about, but at the end of the day, our people, Black folks, I think Indigenous people, we've always known that the oral tradition was a part of our lives. And so I think stepping back into that, this is a time of reckoning. This is a time of return, remembering, re-remembering. And so I'm honored that more and more people are seeing the power of the word and what it means to say a thing now.
I've heard it said that in order to have a language, it requires an army. And that to me signifies the inherent power of words. I used to teach a class from the page to the stage. And in there somewhere inherently, I was trying to shoot the discomfort that you just engendered in me over the term spoken word. I've never, that is a new perspective. And I find it new to the ears because I've never thought of it like that. But I, again, completely understand this false dichotomy. We get genres. You write this kind of thing, you write that kind of thing. And this, again, is using language in a way to categorize and codify. And if you do that with language, it allows some things in, but by the very nature of allowing some things in, you also keep some things out. And the idea that one is either a poet or a spoken word artist is, I think I've sort of always tried to claim both spaces. And so inherently, I knew somehow that I was being distanced from the creation of poetry if I was simply a spoken word artist. But on the other hand, I think I've always embraced the artistry that's in there. Words are performative. And so to only be able to write them, that's nice. That's like being able to ride a bike with training wheels. That's not like getting on a unicycle and doing marathons, though. And to me, there was that dissonance between the two, and this real recognition of, we make things real in this country, or the structures that be in this country make things real by writing them. We write laws that serve some people. The words stay the same, but the action that flows from this static set of words serves different people differently. So there seems to be another kind of power. Words can make reality. They can set borders and all this. And in North America, if it's not on paper, it really doesn't exist. We want you to have a written contract. The oral contract won't hold up in court.
Mm-hmm.
However, if words don't perform, if they can't leave the page, then what? Talk to me about how words have not served us.
Well, I think there's limitations to both the page and the spoken word. And this is why I believe that, we talk about things in terms of the sprint, but not the marathon. So we think a lot of times in terms of the immediacy and the urgency of the moment. And for sure, the moment is real. And now we should always be as present as possible and show up as fullest as we can to the moment. However, there will be a moment after this one, and what we do in this now affects who we become in the future. And a big part of what I've tried to spend my time doing in community with others is recognizing that words are things, and language is how we arrange our worlds and how we see ourselves. And therefore, we must spend time with them and begin to reimagine and to decolonize our imagination to become the very things we want to see. So, I think that there's who you tell, what you say to yourself about yourself to yourself is really important. Who you are to yourself is more important than who you are to anybody else. And we've been taught constantly to seek validation outside of ourselves and affirmations outside of ourselves. And this is what I think the Black Arts Movement was doing. And to the credit of COINTEL, the importance of self-determination became almost a mockery by virtue of about the Black Arts Movement, by virtue of the ways that we exploited and made caricatures out of certain individuals who were the faces of that movement. But the true core of that movement, the effort of that movement, wasn't for us to become Black capitalists. It wasn't for us to become representational, focused on who was at the front of the rally or who was on the stage speaking more than others. It was for us to all go into that place within ourselves to discover who we are, what we're here for, and what we have to contribute, what we have to offer to participate in society that can help us get to this collective goal of freedom and love and liberation with one another. And words have a big part in your conscious self, you know, and there are things that experiences that we have that we sit back in our unconscious self. But words really do have a power to motivate, to inspire, to activate, or to instill more fear, to instill more depression, more anxiety, more confusion, more hysteria, more disconnectivity. And so that's just understanding that at the end of the day, they can incite or instigate those things. However, at the end of the day, you have the choice, you yourself, to rebuke or to accept certain words that get you to the collective, the goal you want to see, the purpose you have here on earth. And so when we talk about organizing community, a big part of that work is to tell the truth, to foster a community of radical truth telling. But it's not so much to be like, let me tell you about what's right and what's wrong so that I can be the person dictating to you how things ought to go. But it's about, let me say what's right to me. What's the truth? Have I told myself the truth? Have I held myself accountable? Have I done the work within myself to be the person that I need to be, so that then I can show up fully? Then I can be at the rally and the protest. Then I can make sure that somebody else has a meal and that they're taken care of. But if I can't do that for myself, if I don't know what I'm worth, then at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many flowery words you tell me. It doesn't matter how many words of affirmation you give me. There has to be a moment where I decide to do the things that I need for my self-determination, for my sense of worth. And, you know, there's a lot of people who speak rhetorically liberation and freedom and talk about oppression of Black people and want to say nigga, nigga this and want to be blackety black in all performative ways. But when it comes down to value systems, when it comes down to what they're willing to do for the person next to them that they don't know, when it comes down to shifting cultures and breaking systems and saying no to things that hurt and harm other people, when it comes to, you know, making sacrifices, when it comes to transforming the way that we relate to one another, those are the sort of actions that require more than your rhetoric, you know, more than you just saying, you know, because it's very easy, like you said, once you do fall to the page, for somebody to just replicate and keep saying the nice talking points, the nice same symbols. So you see the words as a symbol, because that's what words really are. You see the hieroglyphs on the wall, but we might all see them, but we all might be really saying a different thing when we're using those words. And so I think having an understanding that words are symbols, however, there's like I said, the energetic frequency, the intention behind those words is just as important, and how you use words to organize people for a collective vision, not just your individualistic satisfaction and greed and ego and self-gratification and all those things. So then it becomes less and less important about what someone else says or what somebody else thinks or how somebody else views or affirms or rewards me. It becomes, how do I become the orator and the narrator of my life? How do I become the person that speaks the things I want to see into existence and calls on the greatness of those who are around me? So yeah, I think words have their limitations, because at the end of the day, you know, a pen is a sword, but it's not a gun, you know, and bullets move a lot faster than a blade, you know? So we have to be realistic too about the material conditions of our lives. Because yes, the interior world matters, and what we're doing and how we're rearranging and decolonizing is super crucial. But if somebody can't eat, when somebody does not have food on their table, they ain't over here thinking about their heart chakras and they, crowns and all this and third eyes, and they can't even get there. And it's intentional for us to be poor, right? To create the spirit of poverty. That is a spirit, it's all spiritual warfare, what we're going through. And so words names a thing, names the harm so that we can address it, names what, and not just the harm, names the affirmation, names the thing we want to see so that we can do it, so that we can believe it, so that we can change and create the world we want to see. But knowing that takes a real radical education system, and we don't really have that. We see words as a means to an end. It's usually, in capitalism society, words is about agreements, yes, but agreements for the transaction. How do I protect my transaction, my property, my sense of self-worth, my my legacy? All those things are how people have been taught to use words, and particularly the English language, which is why it's so cutthroat. It doesn't really allow for the breadth of the beauty of what it is to be alive.
So I could sit here and talk to you all day.
Me too.
We might have to book you on another edition of The Bigger Picture.
Yeah.
Before we get out of the door, though, it is really important for you to let me know where people can find more of you, where they can keep up with your work and what's coming next for you. How do you want to direct us to pay attention to you going forward from now?
Well, thank you. Well, first, I'd encourage folks to pay attention to themselves. That's a big thing. So, I don't have no answers. I don't know what, I'm just learning like everybody else. And I appreciate you inviting me, and I appreciate anyone who's listening. And I pray that something I've shared resonates. Most of my stuff that I share online is like random work I'm doing or little things I want to share with my friends, which is on Instagram. And I'm on the website. I have my own website, which is just ajamonet.com. So it's AJAMONET.com. I'm on Twitter. I have a Facebook too. So I'm pretty easy to find on the interwebs. And I would lift up also that the collective that we do poetry work, organizing work with is called Voices Poetry for the People. And you can find them on, or us on Instagram, which is Poetry for the People MIA.
All right. So this is a really, really nice contribution to BAMFest. And thank you. Thank you so much for your generosity, your wisdom, and your spirit.
You too. Thank you.
Maybe the war will pay for this deficit when it's over, but I doubt they maxed out on opportunity and spirit over intelligence failure. If you buy that, and I'll bag up a truckload of fertilizer to sell you incurable. Don't be so sure, it's no secret, we all know it, there's no money in the cure. And if they told me and you to rely on faith, then they couldn't afford to separate and isolate. They couldn't afford to retire, play golf all day, have a Swiss account, live to be 108. They hustling and scheming, and seeing confirms what I've been believing, that the power's not cut even. I was hard living. It's coming up in a flawed inner school system. It's the high cost of college tuition. It's the legally biased standards of admission. It's when they're building new prisons with the intentions of putting me and you in them. When you convicted of innocence, civilian or ex-convict, or if you living under laws that contradict, and that ain't hardly as bad as they get. Cause sex don't just sell, it influences behavior too in this land of deceit and abandonment. I hope it's making sense. They benefit from our ignorance. They coming up at our expense. Society wanna gyp you and milk you, and I just wanna hip you and uplift you. So hopefully you can see a bigger picture.
Word got eyes and ears on and she witnessing.
Hopefully you can see a bigger picture.
Slanger see you trying to turn a push into a shove, but are they listening?
Hopefully you can see a bigger picture.
Inspired Inspired by your joint, I'm gonna help you make your point. If they don't see the bigger picture, they'll get in where they slip them. It's hard to uplift them once they toe tag and split them. Inspire, help them see the bigger picture.
Shortly after birth, we become victim to society's form of control and hypnotism. We get consumed in radio and television, and we allow ourselves to be programmed and conditioned. And way before Hurricane Katrina hit, there was neglect and racism on the part of the system, and we poison ourselves with the most dangerous beverages allowed in bars and on liquor store shelves. And since cigarettes ain't crack, they could tax it, get me and you hooked, and make a killing off the comeback. Imagine that. What? $1.5 billion smokers times what? $5 a pack? You do the math. Recognize what's true. And prisoner abuse and cover up murder with a lame excuse ain't nothing new. They just doing what they do. The media too, psychologically abusing me and you. But it's so visible when it's real. We seen you kill. We seen the photos of a dead and disfigured Emmett Till. It's too true to not reveal. It's bigger than your entourage, bigger than your 24-inch rims and platinum grill, bigger than your house on the hills, bigger than your 9, your AK, and the rest of your steel. I truly hope it hit you and didn't miss you, cause in real life you just a victim if you don't see the bigger picture.
Her got eyes and ears on and she witnessing.
You can see a bigger picture.
Slanger see you trying to turn a push into a shove, but are they listening?
Hopefully you can see a bigger picture.
Inspired by your joint, I'm gonna help you make your point. If they don't see the bigger picture, they'll get in where they slip them. It's hard to uplift them once they toe tag and split them. Inspire, help them see the bigger picture. Word got eyes and ears on and she witnessing.
Hopefully you can see a bigger picture.
Slanger see you trying to turn a push into a shove, but are they listening?
Hopefully you can see a bigger picture.
Inspired by your joint, I'm gonna help you make your point. If they don't see the bigger picture, they'll get in where they slip them. It's hard to uplift them once they toe tag and split them. Inspire, help them see the bigger picture.
Hopefully you can see a